Okay, welcome everyone to today's podcast. And again, I've got a wonderful expert who's going to speak to you today, and that is Kathi McCarty. She is an educator, advocate, and the founder of the Meth Toxins Awareness Alliance, inspired by her personal experience with meth contamination in her own home. She is a leading voice in prevention, providing education and championing legislative change during Colorado's 2023 legislative session. Kathi is dedicated to creating healthier and safer properties and communities. So, welcome, Kathi. Thank you so much for being with me today. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Emma, it's a pleasure to meet you as well. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And I'm dying to know, tell me about what it is that you do and how you got into it. Give me a bit of background.
Right. Well, it's a journey, no doubt, and it started as far as my methamphetamine contamination impact. It started in 2018 when I chose to rent out our home in the foothills west of Denver, Colorado, in the United States, because I know you have a global audience here. Um, After I had a serious health event in 2016, I decided to leverage my largest asset, my home, when my youngest went off to college out of state to work on my next chapter. I put all the right provisions in place, I thought, which included insurance to have a tenant in there. It was only going to be one tenant or one lease for 1 year, and then I was going to move back. And then I hired a management company and did all my due diligence as far as vetting and asking all the right questions about how they vet a tenant and place a tenant. And within 90 days after placing that tenant, what seemed like a sensible solution really did turn into my worst nightmare. I learned that that tenant had actually, along with a lot of other illegal activity, he had manufactured and smoked meth in the home to the point where it was destroyed beyond repair. And that put
Wow.
me, yeah, and that put me on a path of uh, ultimately of prevention. I didn't want what happened to me to happen to anybody else.
And that was after 90 days.
Yeah, he was only there 90 days when I was alerted to the fact that there was a maintenance issue at the home via a text from the property manager. I was told it was minor repairs. I was even local in my community of Evergreen when I received that text. We talked that night, and I was never alerted to the fact that it really wasn't a minor repair. It was actually the main water line that had actually had some sort of break in it somewhere, and they had actually ordered significant excavation equipment to dig out that water line to find the break and repair it, and didn't even notify me of all that. And then there was a lot
Wow.
else going on in the property. Property manager had been in the home, taken photos behind the home as well inside, that when I eventually saw those photos, there was a lot going on that I should have been alerted to, and I wasn't. And it was very obvious that they were at minimum trying to hide what was some significant inappropriate activity, if not illegal.
Yeah. Well, what I can't imagine that. I've just rented out a property and I cannot imagine that in my wildest dreams. And where do you start?
Well, I started with a big cry. I mean, I can't sugarcoat the impact, Emma. I can't sugarcoat the emotional uh, impact. This was in fall of 2018. So obviously there's been some time behind it. We're talking 6 years, and I have been able to turn my pain into purpose. Uh, my lemons into some really positive experiences, but it hasn't been without its emotional impact. But what I really had to do is truly climb, especially 100 huge hurdles, and especially in those 100 first days, on what is meth, I mean, I knew physically what the drug was, but what is it really, and how was it impacting my home to the point where I couldn't even stand in there? What led me to actually rent out my home is because I had a serious health event in early 2016 that affected my eyes, it affected my sight, and I couldn't even, because of the significant sensitivities to my eyes, I couldn't even be in the home a minute without my eyes truly burning, and maybe a different person would have had a different experience. So I couldn't go back and live in the home. I had it tested. I had to reach out to a lot of different organizations, companies, read on the internet a lot of information, even though I had sight limitations at that time that were significant, and just learn about meth, what the components are, and what my next steps were. And the next step was really to have it tested to find out how significantly impacted my home was, which was significantly impacted. It was condemned by our county and our state health department once once the reading report was out, as far as the contamination levels. And I had a lot of additional homework to do and to find out if it was even that chance of having it remediated. But it wasn't. It wasn't remediatable to state standard.
Wow, I think we don't think about these things when and when I started this podcast, I wanted to hear about people's journeys, hear the real stories and how it
Mhm,
affects people. This was one of the, I didn't even think about this, and
right.
it's fascinating and so important that we read it in the papers and see it on the news, and but because it doesn't affect us, we don't pay a lot of attention, and we obviously don't go off and research it unless we're planning on opening up one ourselves.
Mhm, right.
So yeah, I just cannot imagine it. So I it sounds like your all your time and energy then went into learning all about meth and how it affects people as well. Just tell me how
Mhm.
you started this awareness alliance.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. My previous experience was I spent over 3 decades in the lending and banking arena. So that was my career. And when I had that health event in 2016, I had to step away from my role and my career ultimately and work on my next chapter because of the site limitations that I had. And my career in lending and banking had me as an affiliate in a lot of real estate type of transactions, for 3 decades, over 30 years. And so I was just blown away that I had spent so much time in an industry associated with real estate where meth contamination was never talked about. Plus the fact that my first home I bought in 1988, even in another state where I knew meth was around, but I didn't know about its impact when it's either smoked or manufactured. And there was a lot of that, all of that going around in multiple states. It wasn't bound by geography in any way. And so that sparked additional focus for me through the personal journey that I had that was not only a criminal process with the tenant who was arrested, but then the civil legal process that I eventually engaged in to try to get whole on this situation. And I had also, like I said, bought my first home in 1988, have bought multiple homes since then, and yet no professional had ever even mentioned meth toxins is one of those, you know, things you should test for, like a physical inspection or asbestos or radon, lead. Those are traditional to here in the States. They're not mandatory, but water quality, water production, if you're on a well, all those all those types of subjects that I was, very, very much aware of being in that industry. And so that's part of where even through the darkest of days, I knew I needed to bring this dark topic into a much brighter light. And that's where I started this alliance and engaged experts in the industry who served it to help me understand it and then deploy it out through public awareness and public education.
That is amazing. And how do you spread that word now?
Mhm. Great question. One of the things that I did initially, and this was during 2020 during the pandemic, and nobody was allowed to meet directly, but I was really getting over the hump of my civil process, dealing with my home. I sold the property fully disclosed, fully contaminated early, but I also worked with experts who had continuing education classes approved here in the state of Colorado, that they would present in front of realtors, and I engaged my networks, and we did 12 classes online. Um, through 2020 and touched over 500 realtors online teaching a CE class. And there was so much good information in this 1 hour, 1 to 1.5 hours that we would talk about online. But what I also realized is, based off of my experience, there was so much more missing that I wanted to include into the public. So I worked with an instructional designer in adult learning education, and she helped me build my own course that I got approved. And I've given workshops on it, online or in person, that are not CE accredited, but just for different audiences, civic and professional organizations, but also through our department of our department here in Colorado that is regulated for CE credits for realtors and property managers. I've been teaching classes last year and this year. So I think I just had my last one for this year yesterday and have taught 26 of those classes so far. So I'm just getting started.
Yeah, a well-earned break.
Yeah, but just getting started and anxious for the holiday, on the other side of the holiday, to double my numbers even next year and beyond. So I've had some great opportunities with various different organizations that uh, serve victims in different areas, um, like victims advocates, law enforcement, real estate, and other civic organizations too. So I'm excited about where this is going.
Amazing. I'm just sorry if I like jump back and forward. It's fascinating to me.
Mm.
So are there, from the research that you did, is there anything else that you found like this, what you do out there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I found so many things. I've found so many holes in our systems. I also learned that as much as I had put provisions in place to have a tenant there, my own homeowner's insurance did not cover the impacts from the contaminants. There were um, um, exclusions in our regular homeowner policies here in the states that exclude contaminants. So it wasn't covered under my homeowner's policy unless there was this caveat of vandalism where the guy broke in, but he had permission to be here through a lease. And when I leaned on his tenant policy that he had on my home, that he was required to have on my home to be a tenant, I found, because of his willful and wanton conduct by committing a crime, that policy was also void. And then I leaned on, so that's two strikes. And then I leaned on the policy of the property management company, because I learned that as much as we had verbal conversations of what they did to vet a tenant, when I asked for the vetted file, uh, I had learned there was only one piece of paper in there, and that was his application. They had verified nothing. They never pulled a credit report, even though they said they verified all sorts of things about this tenant, including he was a highly qualified business owner in the entertainment industry and had excellent credit and all these types of things. So that was shocking. And so I did sue them in our civil legal process here in the states, but that became an illusion of protection as well, because they took me through an 18-month legal process. countersuing me because even though they didn't do what they said they were going to do, there really is no standard of care that they're legally liable for. Everything we talked about was verbal, it wasn't in writing. And they said even if they would have checked his background or whatever, nothing would have come up that would have led them to believe that he could have even been partaking in either consuming or manufacturing meth. There was nothing of record. So they weren't responsible. And so I was met by their E&O, their errors and omissions insurance company, um, uh, at the civil legal process, and for 18 months until I finally had to tap out because of the financial exhaustion as well as the emotional exhaustion, just to move on in my life. I'm still paying on my mortgage to keep my home my mortgage payment current and keep my credit intact. Very important to me,
Yeah.
as well as paying thousands of dollars on top of that potentially every month to attorneys to keep the civil legal process. All while you have to remember I couldn't live there, and I was lucky enough to have family and friends. I was blessed, not just lucky, but I was blessed to have people in my community that would house me. I didn't have a pet, I didn't have children. A lot of people who run into this situation don't have what I had as far as um, friends and family that I could go stay with, because otherwise I would have been paying rent on top of that
Yeah.
while I'm paying for all this. So it's an emotionally and exhaustive legal process that did not leave me whole. Um, I haven't been I in the time that this happened in the States, when I sold my home and the pandemic hit, prices had been skyrocketing here in our community. I could have moved to another state in the middle of a cornfield somewhere, but my children were here, my grown children, and now my grandchildren, and my family and my friends of over almost 30 years. Why should I have to go live in another state in the middle of the cornfield by myself just to buy a house again? But it was
Yeah.
you know it was not an easy process. So that's I'm not looking for any sympathy or whatnot. I'm just letting you know this is the reality of what people go through, and it's hard. It's very, very
Yeah.
difficult.
It's so I'm backtracking again.
Hmm.
So when they say toxic contamination, what is it? I suppose it gets in all the walls, the furniture,
Hmm.
and
Right. Yeah. Anywhere where air travels, methamphetamine contamination can have it. The toxic materials, the ingredients that go into making meth. This is part of what I teach in the course. You might have the stripping down of a lithium battery. You have Drano. You have Sudafed. Um, you have red phosphorus. You have all these chemicals that are very dangerous, very hazardous, and that's why you might see somebody who maybe had an addiction to meth. It doesn't take very long for their teeth to deteriorate, their physical features to be impacted, and whatnot. And so when it's smoked, it's like cigarettes in the sense there's smoke in the air. There's a residue that um, as it settles anywhere that air travels, it adheres to those surfaces. And there may be a surface like a mug that you can wash it in a dishwasher multiple times and get that residue off. But the porous materials of drywall, wood, even furniture, all that has to get thrown away. Clothes you might be able to salvage if you wash them a few times by following the right detergent that they recommend. Excuse me. Uh, Anywhere air travels, it gets through the HVAC systems, deployed through the ventilation systems. It travels and moves through attic spaces, crawl spaces. If you have a multi-unit building, it can get through elevator shafts and move from unit to unit, things like that through cross contamination. That's all real. It may dissipate as it moves down the track, so to speak, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen. And so, a lot of properties, depending upon how heavily they're contaminated, need to be demoed down to the studs where all the drywall's taken out, all the flooring's taken out, everything is thrown away and rebuilt. It's very expensive. all while if you own the property and if you were a landlord and you had tenants doing it, you're still, if you don't own it free and clear, you're still paying on it and you're out the income for the cash flow. So there's a huge expense to it, and I don't have the numbers out in the UK where you're at, because we met so recently to really get some definitive answers. But the feedback that I've gotten here in the US from the testing and remediation companies that are certified here in our state say the average cost to remediate a home, a property here, and it varies by the size and the level of contamination, is about 20,000 US dollars. That's small in comparison to what it would have cost at my home to even try. And yet I had 7 different remediation companies there. They were all willing to try, but none of them thought they were gonna be successful, and the difference between my property and the average property is it was a 1956 restored cabin, so it was all wood, there was no drywall, it was all porous materials, like, I can see some of the wood in the background of where you're at. I'm not sure if that's paneling or walls or whatever, but, wood is very porous, and when you have log beams, there's no drywall behind it to pull out the beams, so my
Right.
structure was totaled.
It's devastating. And I, insurance companies, that's a whole new ball game with their clauses and everything in it. But trying to think that you put your trust in a company and you pay a company to rent to a responsible tenant,
Mhm.
and then that happens, let alone without all the checks and everything.
Right.
That in itself, without finding out what had been done in there, you don't know who might have been in your property, or
Right.
what else they could have been doing if your building hadn't been, if your home hadn't been contaminated. It's quite frightening.
Quite frightening, and I'm here to share there's a lot of gratitude, Emma, that I have in this process. Uh, first and foremost, it was a health event that created the desire for me to rent out my home. I mean, I made that conscious choice, and, I'm here to say that, through the great medical insurance that I had uh, and the healthcare that I received, I can see today I was in the process of losing my sight, and that was reversed. So that's my first set of gratitude. But the things that were going on
Amazing.
in my home, I have gratitude there because as bad as it was at my home, the equipment that they found in there and what he was doing also behind my house outside, he was extracting THC from cannabis, which was cannabis is legal here in the United States. In our state, we were the first one to legalize it. But he was extracting it and making high potency products. And I live in the forest. That property was in the forest. So the bottom line was is what he was doing there was very dangerous. What he was doing inside with the equipment for the cannabis, as well as the meth, was very dangerous, and it put my neighbors and our whole community at risk. And so my second piece of gratitude is that nobody's property was impacted through an explosion, or my community, which um, we've had a lot of fires. There's obviously fires globally, but we've had a lot of fires here, and nobody was hurt or worse. So that's another piece of gratitude that I have. So
Definitely. And I love that. We need to look for gratitude in things when things happen. And it's something I often talk about through. My mother was an addict, although she would never admit it. I've been through addiction, and I am grateful for everything that it's taught me and for who I am now, and that I can help other people with what I've been through. And I would imagine that's the same for you, because you have this knowledge now. You've not uncovered, but you're giving that message to the world of other people that have been affected and don't know how to turn, where to turn, haven't heard of it before, that have you've been in that situation and now you can help them. And I think that is just truly beautiful. Absolutely what you're doing.
I appreciate that. I recognize that, as hard as this has been, I think in some ways I was the right person for it to happen to, because I recognized it with my background, and now, turning these lemons into, learning, legislation. Like you said, we've been able to have a positive impact in our legislative process here in Colorado and our new laws, and we're going to continue to improve them. It's a great start. And meth toxins, actually, when I was within single digits of paying my home off. And so not only did I plan to live there, for the rest of the ability of me to breathe at, 7,800 feet above sea level here in the foothills in Colorado. And have my grandchildren come visit at my grandma's cabin and all that kind of fun stuff, that vision that I had. I also realized, and I was I don't know if I said this, but I was within single digits of paying it off. So I could, look at retiring in a few years and things like that. But it also was going to be the legacy that I left, my kids, and for them to enjoy with their children. And the bottom line is that our properties are our legacy in some ways, the way we transfer wealth. And if we're transferring toxicity into our future, it's how we show up with integrity today, and the steps that we take today that really do leave a legacy for generations to come. And so that's what hit me to the core of what I experienced, is that the people that I surrounded myself with that were supposed to help me did not show up with integrity. And now we've been able to turn that into vision that can have a very positive effect.
Yep, that wasn't the plan for you. That wasn't this. It was the ultimate plan for you, and you're going to leave a whole new legacy.
Maybe.
I think so. It's, as I said, I don't know if it's because it's the UK, or I just haven't heard this topic. And I think it's crucial because you don't, as I said, you don't think about it. And that's the last thing, as you said, asbestos and things like this, they test for, we're aware of it, especially in older buildings. We have that sort of, as buyers, it's something that's in the back of our head. That's the last
Mhm.
thing you think about. So yeah.
Yeah. You think it can happen to you. It's a low income, inner city, high crime type of situation to deal with, but not in rural areas, not in higher income suburbia. And I'm here to say that it's not just a Colorado issue. It's not just national, it's global, it's all over the internet. But because people aren't dying at the level that they were with fentanyl, unless fentanyl is mixed up with the meth, or the opioid situation, it doesn't get the press that it deserves. And that's where, I'm here to bring that into the light for the first purpose of prevention, but then to have, people have a path for um, advocacy needs as well as resources. And now there's tools that I educate people about that are available out there to help protect it, protect properties and things like that. So I'm very grateful for this, getting through the tough stuff and being at this juncture of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's so many questions I wanted to ask you. Tell me about the legislation, because I know you
Yeah.
wanted to mention about that, and
Yeah.
I do hear about that.
I appreciate that. It's probably what I'm the most proud of in this journey, is to actually recognize, and it's because of what the continued journey of my cabin took, is I did sell my cabin fully disclosed, fully contaminated. Um, And the people that bought it said, we know we're taking a chance, but our goal is, they were local and their goal was to hang on to it as a rental. That's what they told us. And when they couldn't get the levels to meet our state standard, and there's only half the states in our nation here in the US have a standard at all. So when they couldn't get it to get down to the fully decontaminated standard, they were able to get it low enough to do what's called encapsulation. And that's where they seal the meth in with a product that's approved for encapsulation, but it's so toxic you can't even buy it here in Colorado. They'll send you to like New Mexico or Wyoming to go purchase it. So it's one toxin over another, but they seal the meth in, and then you're able to sell it here fully undisclosed after that.
Right.
And my question is if it's so safe, what's the big secret? If
Yes.
if a property had mold in it and you had to remediate the mold, eradicate it, whatever the term is, cut it out, get the black mold out, you still have to disclose it. If you have asbestos, radon, lead, you have to disclose it. If you have a material defect where maybe there's a crack in the foundation and you fixed it through a structural engineer and a company that maybe jacks it up and repours a whole foundation or just seals the cracks, you have to disclose it. If you have a leak, you have to disclose it. If, the roof, anything that you repair, you still have to disclose it, but you don't have to disclose the meth.
That's mad. Then you're using another toxin over that toxin.
So, right. And so when, and then the realtor, um, can sell a property just fully contaminated with meth, and then down the road they can sell that same property and not disclose it either. So even is that's our law, so they're just following the law. But is there an ethics involved there? I don't know. I've never held a real estate license, but there's a moral compass issue here
Mm.
in some fashion, and everybody has to answer to their, follow the direction of their own compass. But I'm here to say that, so when I learned that that could happen, because it happened in my cabin, where the people who bought it from me 5.5 months later could not get it fully cleaned, and they encapsulated the meth, then they sold it for more than double what they paid for it, for almost $300,000 more 5.5 months later, undisclosed. And so I knew that that's the law that I wanted to get changed, is where it was required to be disclosed. And we were met with opposition, but I had the ear of legislative leaders here in Colorado and experts who helped, other people like myself who were impacted, who brought unfortunately, the health and the financial impact stories that they experienced as well. We didn't get the disclosure law that we wanted yet. I'm not going to stop trying, but we made significant headway where properties that were previously contaminated and now have been remediated the state standard at least have to now be on a public facing database that our state health department has for 5 years. They
Wow.
they gave us a limit of 5 years, which I think they should be on there forever, but it's a launching spot for one. That was one of the things that we were able to get in this particular law. There's more work to be done, but it's a good launching spot to continue to improve the definitions of what meth means in toxicity means in our legislation, and then it brings awareness, so individuals will know that that database exists and they can go to it and look up properties, do their due diligence, become better advocates for themselves, and if they're professionals, for their clients, and really make informed decisions.
That is amazing. That is fantastic. And yeah, that information should be out there. Absolutely. And I'm thinking I'm guessing when they encapsulate the cabin, there's no guarantee that it's gonna encapsulate all of it. So I suppose it will just bring it down to that level where they deem it safe to sell on, I suppose.
They do. There's not enough data to support that an encapsulated property in every square inch of that property stays encapsulated. And, my
Right.
first thought is when you go to hang up the family photos, you're pounding nails into the wall.
Yeah.
Yes, there are other solutions like adhesive and whatnot, but then what happens when you pull that off? How much are you breaking into it? Yes, maybe it's not enough meth toxicity to make anybody sick. Maybe it's not enough to, obviously make be at a lethal level, but somebody who thought they were safe may have to go and reseal it or decontaminate it. And there's a cost that they didn't even know that they were going to incur simply because it was not disclosed to them. And they were given that choice of doing their due diligence and making the right decisions for themselves.
And what impact would it have on them down the line if their health is affected?
Yeah.
And this
And
is brought
yeah,
out.
that's one of the things we talk about in the workshops in the class, or what are the signs. It could be as minimal as eye irritation or stuffy noses, runny noses. You could break out in rashes. You and I could be roommates in the same property, and I could have a significant impact, and you may not have one at all. Everybody's different. I have autoimmune compromised. I'm obviously much older than you are, so there's all these factors that it's not cookie cutter for everybody. But you could have minor irritations. It could be even more significant. You're breathing in toxins. Somebody who maybe has respiratory issues or asthma, somebody who has more significant health issues could have a much larger impact. Um, pregnant women, along with their unborn babies, are very susceptible to meth toxins. Unborn babies can have some ill effects. I mean, who wants to take a chance on that? I knew I couldn't keep my home because, I lived there with my sons. My daughter had already gone off to college, so she didn't live in that cabin. But one day the kids would have potentially significant others, or my daughter might be pregnant and be over. I knew I could never be in that home again,
Yeah.
because there just wasn't enough good science data to support that there are guarantees. The other thing is that the tenant actually was arrested on multiple felony counts. There were a dozen felony counts, and he was looking at 32 years for what he was doing at my home. But he fled his criminal trial 15 months later, so he was on the run, and I never felt safe. I mean, I don't know. I'll never feel safe. But he was picked up 18 months later in a suburb of the Denver metro area on a traffic stop, and he eventually went through the criminal process again and is now serving a 10-year sentence for a pleaded out sentence that was only one felony count, but even with just one, he still got 10 years.
So did you find out if he had a previous record or anything
He
like
didn't
this?
he didn't have anything that he was busted on. No. And his credit report that I saw 18 days after this all happened, although he didn't have a single late on his credit report as a lender, he was not a highly qualified business owner in the entertainment industry. He was fully margined on 3 credit cards plus an auto loan, so he was current, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. But he also worked at, he didn't own an entertainment company. He worked at a business that was an adult entertainment facility.
Right. Yeah. So
Crazy, right?
yeah. So they could have found out a bit of information about him, couldn't they?
Well, they did. They made it up. They lied. And I still couldn't get whole in our civil legal process. That's why it's such an illusion of protection. And I did sue him as well, but had fled, and I do have a very significant judgment. But there's the collectability piece. It's all that in itself is an illusion. So
It sounds like you've still got a lot of work to do getting
there's
this,
a
not
there's a
just for
ton of
yourself,
work,
but
Emma,
everyone.
and I need help.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, that is
But
amazing.
but I appreciate this platform. I'm just here to share the facts, because as I share my facts, I've been I've had others reach out, and I know a lot of other facts from other stories. And although we all have our unique caveats to our story, there's all one common denominator, and that is that they were blindsided by the impacts of meth contamination, and the at least through the states here, the civil legal process did not make them whole, no matter how much supporting evidence that they had that the people who were responsible um, were indeed guilty. And it's I mean, just it's about preventing it, because once you're jammed up in it, whether you're an individual buying a property, or you're a landlord and you have a tenant, or you're an investor and it's a building that gets contaminated through cross contamination, you're ultimately responsible for the outcome, no matter what. And it's about getting ahead of it.
Yeah, definitely. I've I've got this real urge now after this podcast to get researching. It's absolutely it's yeah, it's given me a lot to think about, and people I'm thinking of to contact and help spread your message and get people to you, because it's so important. And so you said about
Leaders,
class. Go on.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're absolutely fine. So so the classes that you do, are they just for people in real estate?
No, not at all. And I apologize. I think there's a little bit of a delay in this signal here, and I don't know if it's on my side. So if it is, I apologize, but I haven't had any notifications. That being said, no, I've done workshops and presentations for all sorts of organizations, civic, professional industries that serve the real estate industry, whether they're appraisals and or inspectors. Title people are hosting my classes. I come from lending, so I reached out to the Colorado Mortgage Lenders Association, and I gave a workshop at one of their annual conferences, which is very helpful because I went back to my people, right? All
Yeah,
those people that speak my love language of cash flow and credit and debt to income ratio and collateral and all those kind of things that, I lived and breathed for over 3 decades. And I was just blown away that most of them had not heard about meth toxins in real estate, and I was well received there. So I would love to talk to leaders, or be introduced to the leaders in all sorts of different organizations. Property management. I'm not here to diss the property management industry at all. I'm here to say that there's one bad rogue individual, an organization that allowed this to happen and then didn't stand by their integrity when even the ownership found out about it, even though they weren't directly responsible. So that's an ethical issue, and it comes down to money, right? They didn't want to write the check and honor uh, the service that they claim they provided, right?
yeah,
And because these things weren't in writing, some of them were, and yet I still had it was an uphill battle. So I would love to speak to organizations nationally as well as globally, to bring this awareness, whether it's through Zoom online, or I'd love to jump on a plane and come on to the other side of the pond and have
yeah.
those collaborative conversations and bring this education and awareness as would be a huge honor for me. So
So I'm thinking as well, investigator hat on, I'm thinking people that cook this meth and do this, I'm sure they don't stay in one spot for long. So there must be a way of tracking their steps and going back and finding people who have been affected by this
they don't do
legally.
that. Yeah, but they don't do that. I tried to find out where he was living you know, after he was at my home, because remember he was on the run for 18 months. So who was he contaminating after he was at my house, right? I mean, he didn't stop. He set up shop somewhere else and thought he was untouchable. They impounded his vehicle, and that vehicle was eventually sold through through auction and landed in the state of Texas. Somebody bought it. I was able to track that. But do you think anybody tested that particular
Yeah.
vehicle? That kind of thing. Do you think he waited till he was outside his car? I'm not here to say I know exactly what happened, but when you have somebody that's not just recreationally using it, but they're addicted, they're lighting a bowl before they go in somewhere too. So I'm sure that um, it that vehicle was contaminated as well. And I know I'm getting maybe a little too uh, micro detailed on that, but there's a much bigger picture here. I've talked to people that serve in law enforcement, and our car rental industry is being affected by meth contamination. Our hotels and motels are being affected. I'm a baby boomer, so I was brought up that I'm not supposed to talk to strangers. Now we let them sleep in our beds. We do these short-term rentals, and for me, although the bed was the only thing he brought in of his own. He rented it furnished. We rent out our properties with beds in there and furniture and things like that. And there is a level of these these uh, belongings being compromised.
Yeah, that's what, yeah, I started this with this with the property thing, but it's very true. It's these sort of things that are not putting more work on you, but if you start something like this, you realize how big it starts to spread and how big it's a big problem anyway, but all the different areas that haven't been picked up on yet, like the cars and the auctions. And
Hmm.
yeah, my mum used to rent out her property all the time, Airbnb, and she would come and stay with me for the weekend because she lived in Cardiff. So when the rugby was on or the football, they would just have enough money renting their room out for the weekend to come and stay with me by the seaside. And they loved it. But who knows who was in there and what they were doing. And it's something that we take for granted that people are gonna be respectful.
Hmm. That, and we do take that for granted. We can't assume that at all. And so that was another piece that I started to work on in 2019. I thought, well, geez, if I would have had something like a carbon monoxide detector or a smoke detector that would, alert me if meth was being consumed or manufactured early on, not 90 days later, then maybe I could have saved my property and responded to it by it pinging me on my cell phone. I don't know if you could see this, but yeah, by my cell
Yeah.
phone. And so I started to work on something like that as well. And with somebody I knew. Uh, who's in engineering, and we got to the point of getting a provisional patent, designing it, getting a provisional patent and trademarking a name. And then the pandemic hit, and so did my funding for the next step of getting a prototype and maybe developing it. And in the meantime, I had already looked to see if something like that did exist, and there was one guy out in the Australia, New Zealand part of the world, and he was working on something, but he didn't have it uh, to the level that I was wanting it, and so that's why I kept working on it. But then since then, I checked in, and they did develop this this version of an alarm, and so I just aligned myself with them to then offer it at no additional cost, so I can do something through my organization for prevention, because I feel that it's important that if you advertise that you have some detector of sorts that will alert the owners and or management company of that something's there, most people will just move on to a different property that doesn't have it, right? And it's a
Yeah.
good if nothing else, it could be a really good deterrent. Maybe 80% of those people will move on, and the other 20%, if they're caught, they'll be caught through notification early, and then they won't have the situation where 90 days later the levels are so significant that it's going to cost, maybe six figures or more, or in my situation, not be remediatable to deal with it. So that's the next step, is protection. And so I invite your audiences, you'll have my information, I'm sure, to reach out
Yeah.
to me and let me be that point of contact at no additional cost to work for acquiring this new technology that's out there, and more is coming, that allows for 24/7 um, notification, and it's all tracked in software in your computer. So you really can establish a baseline, which is really important with any property when you buy it, and you're going to turn it into a rental or not. Establish a baseline to prove that it wasn't toxic of any meth, and then have this device in there. And then every time you go through potentially a new tenant, you can, if it's a long-term tenant, it's built into your cost of doing business and your return on your investment and things like that. But you'll find that the juice is worth the squeeze there. So
Yeah. I'm going to keep a close eye on you, Kathy. I can see a lot happening. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, all your links will be in and all the information you supplied. So yeah, I will definitely get all that out there. And I'm just thinking before I get to the last question, um, is there anything more you wanted to add? Anything that we missed or
no, really, maybe just a couple things. One is that it's just a true honor to bring this dark topic into the light again. Like I said, I think it's needed. I know that we just can't be so naive that something like this won't happen to us. A good 25 to 40% of the people in the classes, I always ask how many people have been impacted by meth toxins, and it's usually 25 to 40% have some level of meth toxin impact through their clients or through their personal life. I've launched a complimentary magazine online. I sent you the links
oh, I
uh,
did, yeah.
in. Yeah, and so and these are complimentary, but I put together a digital magazine that I launched in June. I just last month put out the second edition. It talks a little bit more about fix and flips, because that's another thing. People buy distressed properties, they paint them up, they clean them up, they flip them, they've never lived in them. There may or may not be disclosure issues, but we all know that sometimes there's a lot of hidden trauma going on in some of these properties. A lot of these distressed properties, it's lipstick on a pig, and can't sugarcoat that one either. And it's important that people know that for the purpose of prevention. So, um, you know, uh, reach out to me, get on my mailing list, get my weekly newsletter, The Clean Slate. There's always one. It's not a long newsletter that's pages long. It's usually one topic. It's a good snippet. And the magazine, Home Zone Magazine, is about living toxin free. So we talk about other things besides meth, although there's a lead in with meth because that's where we launched from. The debut magazine, I am on the front cover in front of my cabin. And yes, I am rocking that hazmat suit.
Love it.
I don't know if you had a chance to see the front cover yet, but I mean, that's how you have to suit up to go into these properties. And I did that for 18 months. I'm certainly joking a little bit about it now, but it's nothing to joke about. But in that respect, get these copies of the magazine. If you're somebody that wants to contribute, reach out to me through the website, which I know you'll have the link, methtoxinsalliance.com. If you have a topic of interest that you think the audiences might like, we have uh, articles about pets and toxicity. Even this last issue, I'm proud to say, my daughter, who is a biologist by education and by her day job, she's also a phenomenal artist. So she wrote about toxin-free art and in sustainability and things like that. So I think there's a lot of great topics that we continue to launch from, that's not just in the mess space. So, but we'll continue to do that too. There's great articles from in both issues from an environmental attorney, meth testing company, remediation company, and more. So
That is just fantastic. Yeah, I'm looking forward to excuse me, reading those. Yeah, what a great idea and a lovely thing from your daughter. Toxin free art. I
yeah.
love it.
Right,
Really
and
nice.
how and the sustainable packaging and even the art, the old products and the off-gassing that could happen. It may not be, lethal, but I think people or who are having issues in their homes and they may not know why, there may be more going on and certainly something to look into as far as the framing, the matting, the materials, anything and everything, and so, that's all there. I also would love to hear from the insurance industry, not just nationally here in the US, but globally. Who is who are the experts out there that could help educate me, and what are you offering that we could deploy this out to the world? Because my goal in the next few years is to touch 5 million souls on this topic and have a positive impact. And that's hard for me to quantify that, right? I never know everybody who gets a chance to read about any of this, but please reach out to me. If you're in the media, whether it's print or otherwise, um, I've learned to become an extroverted introvert, and in that respect, I don't know about you, but I was pretty shy going into this chapter, and I still am, but having conversations with you are really easy, but I don't see a TED Talk in my future, that kind of thing where you just get up and ramble, but I love the Q&A and the collaboration. So, who are the industry leaders that would like to have a conversation and collaborate with me, would be phenomenal. So I welcome those and sending out those invitations.
Yeah, I'm going to spread it as far and wide as I can. But I've got to be honest, throughout our podcast, I've been thinking, Kathi, TED Talk, it would be fascinating.
Well, maybe there's something down the road. I don't know yet, but I'm surrounded by some amazing people who have been great supporters and who have mentored me and really helped me along in finding those areas that could help me improve my message and my delivery, because my mission obviously is very heart centered and my story is real, and I really just don't want anybody to ever any family, or any individual, to go through what I've had to endure through, um, no initial, um, act of mine other than to rent out my home, leverage my largest asset during a very challenging time, and put what I thought were the right people in place that had my best interest at heart to protect me and my property. And so through that, I'm just really appreciative of being the voice for that next step.
We thank you for it because, as I said, I haven't heard of it before, and it is crucial that it gets out to everyone. Um, but I just wanted to end really. You said that your eye health is much better, but how are you now? I want to hear about you and how you are through all this process and everything that's happening. And it still sounds not a whirlwind, but it sounds like you've still got so much going on, but there's a lot more positivity within it. But that still must be
Yeah,
really stressful. And
it
with the
is.
legal side and the how, wow, how are you?
How am I? I'm good. Um, I, I I'm good overall. Do I have my moments? I think I still do. I have a lot to think about, for next year. The tenant is eligible for parole, so he may get a parole hearing. That's the way the U.S. legal system works. When you've served half of your sentence, and he got credit for some time already served, there's that to consider. In the big picture, I have a permanent issue with respect to my sight as far as double vision, and I have these very special glasses that help me, and so that's where these gifts come from, and so I'm just being brutally honest, in that respect. But I have 3 amazing grown children off living their lives, doing phenomenal things, and now 2 grandbabies this year. My topic of meth isn't sexy, but I'm a new sexy grandma this year. So, no,
Oh,
kidding aside, I will someday hopefully have another home again.
that's beautiful. I'm
And that they can come and hang out, and their parents can go off and do stuff as they get older, and do those types of things. Or but in the meantime, I get to spend time with them, and be close to watching them grow. And I'm blessed with good health, and time, prosperity, wealth, and all those other things that just make, hard prints for me, that get me through those toughest days. So thank you for asking.
Kathy. Um, it's been an honor to speak to you. It really, really has. And I thank you for the work that you do on behalf of everyone listening, because I think everybody who listens to this will really appreciate the effort and energy and for bringing it to light. So I'm lost for words. I really am. So just thank you so, so much. And I'm
Well,
pleased that you're going forward with all this.
thank you. And Emma, the same for you. I saw you put something out online, and I'm just so grateful that you just recognized this unique topic to bring to your audiences and to bring to the world. Means everything to me. So thank you for your gift and your collaboration. And we're going to keep talking, and hopefully I'll make it out to your part of the world very soon. And the coast of where you're at sounds amazing. And
Yes,
I hope to have a chance to break bread with you one day soon. So
amazing. I hope so very much. Thank you so much, Kathy.
thank you.